If you'd like to introduce yourself, Ginny.
All right. Well, I'm Ginny Black, and I have been in the composting role for about 26 years. I worked for the state of Minnesota, and that's how I got into it as a recycling specialist, I guess. Titles were always kind of weird at the state. They don't really tell you what you do. And I helped counties implement their recycling programs, part of which was yard waste composting, because we banned the disposal of yard waste in 1990 in the greater Minnesota, in 1992 in the metro area. So compost was always a part of what I did, and it became the sole thing that I did in 2000. And I did that until I retired in 2013. So right now, I am the chair of the Minnesota Compost Council, and I also chair the Compost Council's Research and Education Foundation. So I've continued on since I retired in 2013 to work in the industry still. One would think that I'd know much more than I do based on that experience and length of time, but I'm actually not. I rely on people like Rob for the technical expertise and soil science aspect of the industry. I'm more of a organizer, I guess you'd say. So one of the first questions we have up here is, why did you form a U.S. Compost Council chapter? Well, the truth is, I tried to form a chapter long before the U.S. Composting Council even had this option to be a U.S. Composting chapter. And the industry was still so young that they weren't really, they couldn't really see what the benefit would be for them. So even though I asked, several times, a few years apart, every so often I'd bring it up, and they weren't really interested. And we kind of hit a critical mass here in about 2010, and people started to really talk about it. And just about the time that I retired, that we actually formed or decided to form an organization. So we do a lot of, as I said, we, Minnesota, like you, have a ban on the disposal of yard waste. So we have yard waste sites all over the state. Many are just a municipal site that people can come and just dump their yard waste, and it isn't really managed very much. It's just kind of there. But we have quite a number of commercial facilities. We have a long history of composting in the state of Minnesota, dating back to about 1986 for commercial composters, and it's rather, it's not a really good history until we get to about 1998, to be perfectly honest with you. So the industry finally felt that, we needed to have a voice, that we needed to be able to talk to one another more easily. It facilitates communication. And so that's basically why we formed. But what we do, I don't know if you want to flip to the annual report, that really is what we do. And a lot of it is both, a lot of it's every year, actually. In 2017, we had a planting day at the state capitol where we used compost and planted flowers in the front area, a big, large lawn garden at the Capitol, just to kind of highlight compost and its use. We have a program called Plate to Garden. We're trying to make that connection to everyday folks about, if you're in a compost program for food waste, this is what happens. This is what you get when we take it to that facility. We get this nice material afterwards, and most people don't know that. And they're always kind of astonished when they see that finished compost. We do try to actively participate in the International Compost Awareness Week. I'd like to see us do more there, but it's it's grown a little bit, and for that, I'm glad. We're going to try and get in more schools. The chapter is talking about actually seeking out a partner to have an event themselves in the week of International Compost Awareness Week. So we'll be working on that over the winter and try to pull something together there. We have 2 or 3 workshops a year. The one in 2017 happened to be a collection, organics collection, that was really geared more towards municipalities, because that's really who does a lot of this. We have in the metro area, we have a legislative goal of 75% diversion. We can't really reach that without food waste composting. We have to have that. So it's really beginning to the discussion and how to do it and what the names that you use. There's a manual that the metro counties have put together to try and standardize the names across programs, so that when people go from one county to the next, or you live in Scott County and you go to a baseball game at the Twins, you see the same sign both in Scott County and at the Twins Stadium, so that so there's less confusion. So we have a manual that's been developed for that. We were partners with Stevens Point. In fact, I kind of twisted their arm to have the first compost operator training course. And they hosted it again a second time this past year, for which I'm heartily glad. That particular training has been going on since 1997. And when it was first started, it was Minnesota and Wisconsin. And then Iowa joined in, and we kind of rotated for many years to the 3 states. And both the other states kind of dropped out, and Minnesota was doing it, and now we've lost our person. So it kind of shifts around, it depends on who's around and available to do things. And so Stevens Point has had it the last couple of years. We got a grant from the state of Minnesota for $35,000 to put on 3 one-day trainings. Our compost rule requires that of source separator organic facility operators, compost facility operators. So we're helping the state develop those trainings. And
hey, Ginny, I have a question.
Yeah.
So with the funding that you received and with the training manual that you created on how to helping to train existing composters to accept food scraps and process them, is that something that if we became a Wisconsin chapter, would we be able to utilize those resources that you guys have already established and tweak so that we're not starting the whole thing from scratch?
Yes. And we didn't do a manual on training. What we did is a manual on words, so that the compost bin in Dakota County is labeled the same thing as the compost collection bin in Hennepin County. So people, when they're going back and forth, because it's a big metro area, and people, and you guys are the same, people go all over. And, if you're calling it organics in one county and you're calling it compost in another, people are going to sit there and go, well, is it that the same? It's confusing. So we're trying to do in the metro area anyway, because of our 75% conversion requirement, trying to come up with some standard language across the metro area that's used. So we have that, and absolutely, I think it's on our website already. So if you wanted it, you could go get it. We just updated it though, so I'm not sure that the new version is on it. But yeah, I've already shared with many of the chapters that have been startup. You have to fill out it was like writing a college paper for the IRS to get your 501c3 status. And I've shared that with a couple of chapters. We have bylaws, you have to have bylaws, you have to have conflict of interest policies, you've got to, there's all kinds of things that you find out you either need to have because the IRS requires it, or it's really helpful for operations of the chapter. So And all the chapters do that, and they all, they're all a little bit different because we're all in different places, geographic places, and have different things going on in our state. So they all share it, absolutely. So chapters are required by your agreement with the U.S. Compost Council to have at least one member at the annual conference that they have every year. That floats around the country. Last year it was in Atlanta. This year it's going to be, or 2019. In 2018 it was in Atlanta. We're still in this year. In 2019 it's going to be in Phoenix. In 2017 it was in LA. So it kind of moves around. And it's always south, which is nice for all of us in the northern states because we get to go to someplace warm. But they have a huge equipment demonstration. It's one of the reasons why they can't come up to the northern states in the winter and have that conference, because they need good weather to have, or at least relatively good weather to have that big equipment demo. So generally somebody goes to that annual conference. We've had quite a bit of interaction with BPI, the Biodegradable Plastics organization, because that's a big issue for commercial composters. And PFOAs have come up in the concern of regulators. So we've been working with BPI to be sure that their products are PFOA free. And they will be if they are not already, which they are, but what little there is in some of the products will be free, I think, March 2019. So that's a good thing. We always get requests for speaking. I will be talking again this year at the state fair about backyard composting. We don't stick with just commercial composting. We get, I'm talking with an agency person to do a food preservation, so you can reduce the amount of food waste. So there's all kinds of options. You don't have to stick with just composting. Our state has a waste reduction hierarchy that is reduce the food, then it's food to animals. Usually it's hogs here, but it could be something else. And then composting, anaerobic digestion, is kind of the hierarchy here in the state that we kind of work under. So while we focus primarily on commercial, it's not exclusive, and we're free to do other things if we wish to. So we can do that. We've mailed letters to retailers who we found they have a product that says it's biodegradable, but it isn't real clear. And that's very confusing because that's not compostable. They're different products. And so we've written letters to them to let them know that that's because they think it's compostable. If they have a biodegradable bag, it's compostable. Well, it's not. Not the same thing at all. So we, have do an education of retailers. You can flip to the next slide. We just do all kinds of stuff. What else do we do? We just applied. Oh yeah, we did a strategic plan in 2017 and reviewed it again in 2018 to make sure it was up to date. And we were working on the issues that we identified that were going to be priorities. You have to renew your chapter agreement every now and then. There's kind of housekeeping stuff you got to do. We got the grant for the trainings. I talked about that. We just sent in another grant. The state since our recycling law was passed in 1989, there has been a grant program that the state has, and I was a grant manager for a very long through the whole time I worked for the state. And so we put out topics that we want people to submit grants to, and when we review them and they decide to award them, well, we just, now I'm on the outside, I'm submitting the grant and they're reviewing it. And we hope to hear it's going to be on market development. So we're going to do some work around market development. We have asked for a half-time staff person, paid staff person. We have no paid staff. None. We are all volunteers. And that means things go much more slowly than you would wish them to go. But that really gets to we have a bi-monthly newsletter, we have monthly board meetings, we survey the board on how we're doing and solicit suggestions. I've done an economic survey we're just completing this year. This is the second round of that. We did it a couple of years ago, trying to quantify the composting industry in the state of Minnesota. So there's just a ton of stuff that we can do. Yep.
How many people are in your
members? We have about 93 members. Many of them came through the U.S. Compost Council, so their membership drives. What they do is, if somebody from Minnesota joins the U.S. Composting Council, they are automatically a member of the chapter, and we get 10% of their dues. So that's one of our funding streams. It amounts to about $1,300 a year, basically. Another funding stream is our workshops. We usually will, there's a registration fee. Oftentimes.
Just a second, Ginny. I had to mute everyone, and then I got to unmute you. Unmute. Okay. There was some background noise, so I just temporarily muted everyone. I think we can hear you now.
Can everybody hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So our workshops and trainings are also funding streams, revenue streams for us. We made on this training yesterday, and I didn't get any sponsors. I was so busy. I really feel bad because I probably could have got a couple $1,000s in sponsorships. But we made $1,700 anyway after all of the, fees. PayPal, you have to have a PayPal account because people pay by PayPal, and they take a fee out of everything. I think it's 2.5%. So anytime if you do your membership through PayPal, which many people pay their membership there, it's 2.5%. And that's how so PayPal is free to you, except that they get that fee every time someone uses that. So I frequently write checks because I want my money to go to the organization I'm sending it to. I don't want it to go to PayPal. And a lot of people do that too, actually. Let's see, other funding source, of course, is membership. We have our own membership drive, and we get members that way. Probably a third of the members that we have are a membership drive. That's been kind of a difficult thing to do. And I know there are lots of composters who are not members. So, for example, one of the things I'm going to do this fall is in September is I'm going to go out to all the big composters, sit down and talk with them, see their facility, walk through their facility, ask them, what can we do to help them? Why aren't they a member, and what would entice them to be a member if they aren't? And so there's a lot of work that can be done in that regard, and other businesses too. We are lucky here in the state of Minnesota. We have a compostable resins manufacturer and a compostable products producer in our state. And both are very strong members of our organization, and are very helpful financially supporting us. So, and they really don't ask for much either, actually. It's kind of interesting. But so let's see. So membership, workshops and trainings, and then the USCC. And that's pretty much our revenue streams. That's where we get our money. And I think it's around, we were looking at that, and it was around between $13,000 and $15,000. And then the grants, too, is a revenue stream. $13,000 to $15,000 a year. So it's not a lot of money. And one of the things we want to do, but it's very limited by the IRS, and that is lobby at the legislature. And you can only spend 20% of your expenditures, not your revenue, your expenditures, your budget on lobbying. So we calculated that it'd be a couple $1,000s a year. Well, it's hard to, a lobbyist at $200 an hour, it's 10 hours. That's not much. So we have to figure out how we're going to manage that. But that's something we'll be looking at this fall, and hopefully be able to hire a lobbyist for a little part of the legislative session, because we're all volunteers. Everybody else except me has jobs, so it's tough for them to get there. I'm retired, and I leave the state for 3 months during the legislative session as it happens, so I'm not here either, which actually I'm very thankful for, because I used to spend time at the legislature, and I really don't want to do that again. It's just not a fun thing to do.
Do you find that you have a relationship like with your regional SWANA chapter? Because I think SWANA has like lobbying funds or something like that. Do you find that there's a lot of overlap or something like that?
SWANA is by and large composed of landfill operators. And landfill operators really don't like us very much, because we're taking food waste out of the waste stream, regardless of the fact that, it's a state goal to do that. We're taking food waste out, and it's, as you know, very heavy, lots of water. They lose lots of revenue when we take that material out. They don't like that. They don't like to lose money. They want to make more money, which, they're a business. That's what they're supposed to do. So we have not, the large haulers, Waste Management and Allied, are the two that own the landfill in the state, the private ones, and neither one offers curbside recycling of organics. So, and it's going to be a push to get them to do it. But we do have the goal, and Hennepin County, the largest county in the state, most populous, not landmass, but most populous, is probably going to pass an ordinance requiring curbside composting pretty soon. So that's going to kind of change the dynamics of the whole situation. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Did someone have a question?
Jenny, I was just going to say that if anybody else wants to jump in with a question, you can unmute yourself. I just muted temporarily because there was some background noise.
Yeah, anytime. Ask a question.
I threw one up in the chat. I just wondered what the breakdown of membership is between individuals, organizations, companies, institutions.
Well, we have about 2 or 3 individual membership. Most of them are companies or public sector, and I don't know the percentage of those. It depends on how you're going to count it. If we just count the ones that have paid have paid the supplemental membership fee to us, aside from the USCC membership, that's mostly public, actually. The public sector, I have found, and this has been true for a very long time, really doesn't see, unless they're operating a compost facility, they don't really see the benefit of being a U.S. Compost Council member. So they tend to join the local chapter because it's local and it's dealing with their issues more. And so the companies that we get, by and large, although not all, but the vast majority, come through the U.S. Compost Council, and many of them will pay the supplemental registration, membership fee to us. But the equipment companies rarely pay us a membership fee over and above the U.S. Compost Council. I could get to that information. I have the membership. It's on my computer here, so I could tell you exactly. But by and large, our business members come through the U.S. Compost Council. Our public sector members come through our contacts and our membership process.
Ginny, if I could just go back to that first question again and maybe try to answer it from our perspective, or maybe people online could have an answer for it. Like Melissa, you might have an answer for it, but why go to all the bother? You know, why form a state chapter? What's the benefit to those who are involved?
You want those guys
No,
to?
yeah, I mean, you can
Yeah.
take it first, Jenny, and then
Oh,
maybe
okay.
Melissa or someone can
Well,
answer.
you know, I think it provides a really great networking opportunity. And it connects all parts of the state. And so, you know, at the training yesterday, we had someone from far northwestern Minnesota. We hardly ever see them down here, but they have a compost facility, and they were down here, and so we got to talk with them. They get our e-newsletter. We send out a bi-monthly e-news through using Constant Contact, which is $45 a month. So it's, you know, it's about $500 a year, a little over 550. And that gets information out from both the state perspective as well as the regional and national perspective. There's stuff on there for everybody. And so I think it provides that kind of a network that isn't there, which is kind of what SWANA does too, actually, for solid waste managers. But this is more focused on a specific type of activity. So it depends, you know, like, for example, I need to talk to Nora at BioCycle because she just had a wonderful article in the most recent BioCycle on PFOAs. And this is a huge regulatory issue here in the state. I know a lot of my members don't see it. So I want to put it in our e-news so that it gets out to them so that they see this, because they're all going to be dealing with this issue here in the state. So we can identify, you know, current issues for them and highlight them in our newsletter so they don't have to look all over for things. And training, we do a lot of training, and we get, you know, last year's training, there was over 50 people. This year we had over 40. We always get a lot of people that are interested in the trainings that we have. So I think those are probably the primary things that we have. The workshops are always well attended. We always have 35, 40 people at the workshops. And most of them are just from the metro area here, 7 counties. It's not from the entire state even, because they don't have that requirement. So people appreciate the ability to come and learn about what others are doing, and then just like the communication, you know, when you're there during the breaks, talking to someone who presented or somebody who made a comment, and it's like, oh yeah, I want to talk to you. So that networking opportunity at the state level is, I think, people find very valuable. So those are the kinds of things that I see that it provides for people.
Melissa, I think you're a advocate for forming a chapter. So what would you say is a reason, or would you just repeat the same reasons?
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo exactly where Ginny's coming from. For me, it is about creating one voice and making sure that both rural and urban environments feel heard, but also being able to create a training program. The training program that we had in Wisconsin through UW Extension is gone. You know, now we have the Midwest Composting School that started stepping up and being able to train organizations, but SWANA, the local chapter here in Wisconsin, I think is starting to form a great network around organics. And I just feel that if we could create a chapter that we would be able to channel those focuses a little bit better, because it wouldn't be necessarily just focused around municipal desires, but it would also take into a little bit more consideration the private sector, you know, residents and things along those lines. And again, just bring that one voice that can hopefully help us actually change policies, move initiatives and agendas forward in a way that makes sense, so that we're not always trying to reduplicate the wheel in every single different county that's looking to approach this. I guess my question is, and where I think value could come in is, does the U.S. Composting Council provide their chapters with additional support than they would if you were a private business that was a U.S. composting member? You know, I guess I'm just trying to see the additional benefits of being an actual chapter versus just a bunch of different businesses being their own member.
Right. Yeah. Well, they provide services to the chapters in two ways that I could think of right offhand. Maybe I'll think of more. And one is financially. You get a portion of their dues. And also membership drives. We were just had a quarterly call. We have a quarterly call, so all the state chapters from around the country get on a call once a quarter to talk about what they're doing and share things. And that's a lot of times where, you know, it's like, oh yeah, oh Colorado, we want to do that. Can you send that, you know, to us so you don't have to start from scratch again? You find out what they're doing, and it's like, yeah, I want to see that. You know, Michigan hired a lobbyist. I found that out. It's like, oh, if you guys got an RFP, you know, I don't have to start from ground zero developing that RFP. Yeah. So they provide that sharing amongst the chapters, which is good. So there's some financial support and sharing. And there was one other thing in the on. Oh, membership drives. We have worked together on membership drives, and we just talked about that actually the other day. It was Monday that we had that call. And so that Linda was kind of, well, tossing out there, what if we do a membership drive? Can that help you guys? And maybe, you know, we give a 10% discount for people, you know, that join from the state food. So, you know, we're talking about that and seeing how that will work. And membership is a tough nut to crack because it's very time consuming and, you know, we're all volunteers. So I've spent hours with spreadsheets trying to mush them all together and, you know, make sure I have accurate information. And oh my goodness, it's just really something. They're also looking at, on this call on Monday, they're looking at, and this has not been true in the past, but could be true in the future, depends on what their decisions are, developing their own database. And some of these programs, software programs that they're looking at, actually have the opportunity for you to have a web page through the U.S. Compost Council. Now, I don't know if there's going to be a charge for that. I don't know what, you know, we have our own website, and it does a lot of stuff for us, really a lot of stuff for us. We have a members only area where members can get specific information. Only members get to see the PowerPoints from our workshop. Like yesterday, I will send the non-members a 30-day window in which they can look at those PowerPoints, and once that's over, you got to be a member to have access to that. So we try to create member benefits through that. And the U.S. Composting Council helps us with some of that stuff. But I don't know if their website will do that, so I probably should talk to Linda about it a little bit to see what kinds of features those websites have, because it might cost them a whole lot extra money to go that direction, and nobody's really going to use it because it doesn't provide the services that they're going to want to have. We don't pay that much for Weebly. We use Weebly, and it's pretty simple to use. And
Ginny, can sorry. Well, I just want to just interrupt you again to see if anybody else has any questions.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. I'm curious about looking at, you know, the chapter in Minnesota is based on a volunteer operation, which is great that you can do that. I'm wondering how many of the other state chapters are either based that way, or if there are state chapters that actually exist where there's somebody funded to actually do the work that is inevitably going to come along with this process.
Right. The only one I know of is California, and it's a huge state, and so they have a lot more opportunity to do fundraising than almost any other state. I don't trying to think. I don't think there is anybody else who has even a part-time staff person, which is one of the things, actually, that's an interesting question, because one of the things I've forwarded when I was on the U.S. Compost Council board, when we were talking about implementing chapters and since, is that, you know, there's going to be states that it's going to be totally impossible. If Minnesota can't raise enough money to have a part-time staff person, it's not likely that many other states are going to be able to do it. We've been active in this area for longer than almost any state in the United States, and we still can't do it. So I proposed regional chapters. So maybe you have Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. We've cooperated a lot in the past, and maybe through that mechanism, you know, we could get a part or full-time executive director that could, you know, organize us and keep us all moving forward. And there's all kinds of structural issues and things of that sort. But that's a whole other story. I just heard lots of horror stories about SWANA yesterday. But maybe that's an opportunity. I mean, you know, North and South Dakota, we do get people that are training from North and South Dakota. But they got like 2 facilities. They'll never have a state chapter. I don't even think Nebraska could have a state chapter, you know. So I think there's an opportunity maybe to form like a Midwest Compost Council. And then we can, you know, take advantage of that financially and have some paid staff, actually. The thing that I worry about or am concerned about with that kind of a model is it kind of eludes what happens in each state. You know, the state chapter can focus on your state and activities in the state. When you become regional, that gets a little bit blurry, I would say. So, what's your other question?
Well, my other question was just, you know, it's sort of along the same lines in terms of the money and the time, and just sort of thinking about the financing. And in terms of, you know, I hear you talking about, like, you know, the membership for Constant Contact. I'm thinking, you know, I run a small department here on the campus, so I know money is always an issue. And so that's the other thing that I'm thinking about is, like, you have all of us on the call, some folks who I didn't even catch who they were because of when they joined or what have you. And so I'm thinking, like, yeah, there's all probably a collective interest in this and what it might bring. But I go back to that, like, okay, well, who pays for that? You know, and if it's just supposed to be, you know, a hodgepodge collection of volunteers, I mean, it seems like you've got a history and you're retired and it's a passion, and so you're like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. Like, those people don't randomly just pop up and are like, yeah, I'm going to throw, you know, a bunch of my time at this every year, and I can commit a few $1,000s to making this happen, and here you go. And so, you know, for me, I'm more of a pragmatic, practical kind of thinker, and saying, like, okay, well, if we're really if the collective desire is to really do this, then for me, I look at that and I'm like, well, what's the plan? How are we finding the financial resources to, you know, even $500 to make that possible? You know, I also hear you talking about fundraising, and it's like, you know, for me, there's very little that I despise more than having to go out and, like, continually ask for money, right? So it's like, okay, you know, looking at the tangibility of this, it's like, yeah, it's great. I mean, seeing the list you put together of the work that you're doing is awesome. And yet at the same point, like, I don't see that as a replicatable plan going forward unless you know a you in Wisconsin who wants to do that. And so if I don't know a Ginny in Wisconsin who wants to do that, then that sort of leaves me going, like, okay, well, you know, how does this happen? Where does it come from? Who's got the time? Because it's like, you know, I know I can't speak for everybody else, but I don't have the time. So that's sort of my thing. It's like, it seems like a good idea in principle, and I'm interested in trying to see what's out there. But at the same point, like, I also want to know the tangibility of, like, okay, how is it really going to happen if we want to move it forward in Wisconsin?
Dave, go ahead, Jenny.
Well, the one thing I will say is I have a very active board, and I do not do this alone. I have lots of folks who step up and do this. And so that is helpful. But I hear what you're saying, because I worry about, well, what if I decide I'm totally sick of this. I'm done with this. I'm walking away. You know, what's going to happen to the organization? I have no idea. I think it will go forward, but I don't know. And the fundraising, actually, the fundraising is a whole lot easier than you might think. I sit here all the time and think, you know, this is not what I ever thought I would be doing when I'm 67 years old. You know, I mean, it's just like, where did this come from? Doing this kind of thing. And it isn't actually all that difficult. I'd say looking at our costs, our baseline costs, probably around $2,300 to $2,400 a year, and that includes a pretty nice website, QuickBooks, which you have to have some kind of accounting thing because the IRS will require it if you become a 501c3. You'll have to do that. It took us years to get there, by the way. And constant contact. Those are the three things we pay for. PayPal is paid for by a fee. So when someone registered for our training yesterday, PayPal automatically deducted the fee, the $2.22 or whatever it was, from that $100 registration. So we never pay PayPal anything out of our pockets. It always comes, you know, out of the registration fee or the membership fee, which is two things we really use that for. So you wouldn't be paying for that except if you actually used it. If you never used it, you wouldn't pay a cent.
Ginny, if I could just jump in again, I'm sorry. You're kind of the excuse that brought us together, so thank you. And and you know, I live in Madison, but I've been focusing my work in Milwaukee for the past, well, on this issue, a couple years. But I do, obviously, living here in Madison, I know that there's been a lot of interest and activity around this, and we have Brian Johnson on the phone from the city of Madison. And earlier, I had the settings so that only people whose video cameras are on showed up on the screen, and I changed that so now you can see, you know, Rob up in Stevens Point. We did brief introductions before, maybe before some of you were on, but I guess rather than focus for Dave, that was a great question, but rather than focus for a minute on how hard it looks, because it does. I guess I would just ask, you know, Brian from Madison, you know, maybe another voice, Rob, or Angie, I don't know if you're up in Stevens Point, but another voice, and just asking the question, is there any reason to try to be better connected, period, between Milwaukee, Madison, Stevens Point? I know there's that interest in activity in Appleton, I imagine, you know, Green Bay and other cities. So composting is a very local activity. Is there any reason, I'm asking my Wisconsin folks here, is there any reason why we'd have any benefit out of being you know, just better connected than we are now? Because it sounds like a chapter could be pretty low. You know, we could start pretty basic. You know, we don't have to jump into the level of activity that Minnesota's achieved. So, Brian, do you want to chime in from the Madison side?
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, I think okay, great, excellent. I don't know where my mic is on my computer, so I'm glad it's working. So anyway. The value I can see of being connected this, because from the city's perspective, trying to start a food scrap recycling program, say we are going to run into the same problems that say Green Bay is going to run into, that Milwaukee is going to run into. So having some sort of network to kind of learn from each other to make certain that, like, so say, for example, someone in Door County wants to try to do a food scrap recycling program from the ground up, they can more easily learn from the mistakes that Madison had in our program so they can set that up right. Or plus from whatever composter they happen to be working with, to have a suite of resources so they know, like, oh, hey, this is how we're going to have to wrestle the plastic bags because you're going to see them. Maybe Melissa's have figured out some sort of secret sauce for that. Or not, or if somebody from Blue Ribbon, say, you know, that's been working with food scraps for a while, that has some sort of advice to provide another composter on the back end for that. So I think there's there's definitely value in that, just from this past experiences that, and as there's more interest on the ground, and it seems more possible for other communities to get into this too, so it's not just a Madison and Milwaukee thing. So it sort of seems like something all of us can do around the state, make it feel more possible, I think, in some ways, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any value, Brian, or do you, maybe you don't, or maybe you just need to hear more of what it is in terms of doing this as a chapter of the USCC versus just forming something, a loose knit kind of common, something we could name it ourselves, the Wisconsin Compost Alliance. Do you see any value in a chapter?
Well, I can see it just because it's an already established entity that has a name. It's a known entity just from either it's a biocycle publication, which I believe they put out, or in like other. Minnesota does it, so good God, we can't let that happen. Wisconsin should do it too, right? If anything else, just neighborhood rivalry. And but no, one of the things I see here in Wisconsin too that has been a problem for us here in Madison trying to do this food scrap thing has just been like a lack of options to be able to go for this, just because there's not enough local composting options available. So that having some sort of established network that has some sort of name recognition that we could point people to that might be interested to get trained up to be able to provide them, to open up some of the service possibilities for us. That's one of the things that hemmed us in the city for our composting or our food scrap recycling program, is that there's really like one and a half options locally for us to haul this stuff to, and so being able to try to get more options available out there for us to be able to provide these kind of services to people would be a big help.
Can I chime in here? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
This is Angie Lamar, and I'm sorry that I wasn't here right at the beginning for introductions, but I'm kind of representing a few hats here as I work for a nonprofit organization, Recycling Connections. We do outreach and education in all areas of solid waste, recycling, composting. Composting is a huge passion of ours. But I also am representing the Associated Recyclers of Wisconsin. And but I also come in here with a personal interest as well, as in my community that I live in southwestern Wisconsin. We've started a compost collection program. We're hauling, we're collecting, we're processing. And so kind of a number of hats, but I really want to speak to Dave's question and also just this topic that we're talking about and bringing, potentially Recycling Connections and or Arrow. We work very closely together as, but Arrow has had for probably 15 plus years an organics committee. And I think when I first came into Arrow and Recycling Connection almost 10 years ago, it was a very happening committee, and there was a lot of energy around it, and there was a lot of key players around the state, both from the private and the public sectors, as well as on our university side of things. And we've seen over the years, we provide a networking opportunity where we have an online listserv where people can chat, people can talk. We would do trainings. We've done some advocacy. We've done where we provided some on-site education for those municipalities who really wanted to step up their yard material composting, where they, instead of just collecting it and sitting it on location, they actually were learning how to compost it. And so I think what has happened over the years, as some of those composters either became less involved or they retired and moved on, these people who were really energetic and holding that committee, I think then as new composters were coming in, Arrow didn't seem, I don't think it, when you hear Associated Recyclers of Wisconsin, you don't think, oh, that's my composting community. Yet we do have this small community of people who are involved within Arrow. Composting is a form of recycling. And so there is this small network we try within the Wisconsin Integrated Resource Management Conference, which is our state conference that's held by SWANA and WIC-SWAMA and Arrow. It's jointly hosted. We try to get a composting focus in there to help serve those composters. We aren't always able to get those types of presenters. I think part of that is because they don't really know that they fit there. Yet I think on a statewide level here in Wisconsin, we do such a good job of connecting everybody, or trying to, and bridging those gaps. So making sure the recyclers and the landfill folks and the engineers and the educators and the haulers and all of these people who are integrated into this system within Wisconsin are all able to communicate. And I guess my long piece of this is that what I seem to be hearing is that we need to find a place to house this organization. Greg, I didn't know, with you being involved with Extension, if Extension was considering this. In the past, Extension held the Master Composter program. In the past, Joe Van Rossum has held some other great networking chat groups, regular meetings on building the organics conversation here in Wisconsin. And if we need a place, that's a big question that I have, because we don't necessarily have a Ginny, and I don't think we're going to find a Ginny here in Wisconsin. If they were here, I think they'd be a part of this conversation right now. But the key people who are talking right now are the people who are doing some things and making some potential movement. Whether that's Arrow, I don't know. Whether that's Recycling Connections, I don't know. Both of those organizations have the ability to manage and hold something like this. Whether it's helping to build Arrow's current organics committee, and maybe we have some affiliate membership opportunities with the National Recycling Coalition. We started one with NAMA, which is the hazardous materials, the National Hazardous Materials. So whether or not we want to try and do something also with US Composting Council that would help support the composters to know that they have a place and they have a voice, even though it's under the Associated Recyclers of Wisconsin, we still have this composting piece.
Andy?
Sure.
Just Minnesota chapter approached our recycling organization and asked if they would like us, if we could be a part of their organization, only we focus on that. And they turned us down flat. It was just amazing. But in other states, and in particular Michigan, they are a part of the Recycling Association. And I think I don't know if North Carolina is, there's several more actually, that actually are parts of their recycling organization. So Arrow is definitely an option in partnering with the U.S. Compost Council to become a chapter of the U.S. Compost Council. It's kind of, I don't know how they work that, but there's some kind of an agreement, I'm sure.
Right, and I think we'd have to just have that conversation. I think we'd have to talk to our membership. I think we have to seek out to the composters what their needs are. What I think right now, even though our organics committee is sort of on hiatus, it's been active and it's been meeting regularly until up about a year ago, only because the people who were sort of chairing that committee needed to step away to do some other things, and nobody was willing to step up. We still have an online chat group. So if somebody has, that I think has maybe 30 of our members who have said, I'm interested in organics. And so we have this as an active online chat group. So if they want to say, hey, I used it just recently because we in my small little town were looking for they were putting together a backyard composting ordinance. And so I wanted to see what people had. So I was able to reach out to our membership. And so it gets utilized and it can get you right to those people who have an interest in organics. But whether, I don't know what that model looks like. I guess I am here saying Arrow very much feels that organics is important and wants to have it a part of the conversation. And there's a few of our people on the call who are Arrow members. And I think that it's a great conversation to have, and I'm excited to think whether or not it would help people, and maybe we need to call one of these other state models that they are connected in with their, state recycling association, and figure out what that looks like. But I think people just don't know that Arrow has this organics track, and if we had more composters who were very excited, I think that could be built up and revived really well.
Hey, Angie, I got a really quick question. It's Melissa with Compost Crusader. So do you think, oh shoot, I hope you guys can't hear that. Okay, sorry. Do you think that you would, do you think that cause so SWANA also has a food organics subcommittee that has been pretty active, I guess. I've only been a member of, of it for a couple of months, but I'm wondering do you think that there would be headbutting or anything along those lines between SWANA and Arrow if we utilized one of those organizations to be a designated Wisconsin chapter? One of the things that I was thinking of the benefits of being a USCC chapter is that it would kind of be autonomous. So we wouldn't have to necessarily go through any political hoops or whatever, right? I mean, that world, Arrow, SWANA is extremely new to me. And so I don't really know, but that's just kind of something that, being in the nonprofit world, sometimes I feel like that happens. Sometimes everyone's trying to go after the same funds type of deal. And I guess I don't want that to impede progress because we're so busy trying to figure out who's going to take ownership versus just putting that energy into creating something autonomous. So, I mean, I guess I would just like your feedback on what you think, how we could prevent that type of situation.
Yeah, is that SWANA's Badger chapter that has that food organics committee, or is it SWANA National that has that organics committee?
It's the Wisconsin chapter.
Okay. I imagine there are people, we work very closely with SWANA. There are a lot of people who are SWANA members and Arrow members and WIC SWAMA members, which is why we all gather together for conference. And no, I don't think that there is competition for who's going to hold this. I think more that everybody wants to see something happen. I do know that SWANA right now does not have a staff to support administrating certain things. I won't say that they wouldn't in the future, but I do know right at this very moment that SWANA doesn't have someone who could administer that. Arrow has a staff that can administer certain things. But again, that's not to say, and I would imagine if I saw the list of who is all on that SWANA Organics Committee, that there's a lot of overlap and probably know all the players at the table or many of them. And I think it's just a matter of having that conversation of where does it make most sense. And I don't see it being, I don't think there's a lot of competition. We work often together on advocacy, statewide. A number of people serve on the various boards. So if it made sense, it doesn't make sense to have multiple committees, in my opinion. It doesn't really make sense to have a SWANA Organics Committee and an Arrow Organics Committee. There should really just be one committee that we're all working together. And so if we need to just have that conversation, it's an easy conversation. Like I said, many of those people are the same players, whether they're speaking for Arrow or they're speaking for SWANA, and they all want the same thing. So I think we need to have this conversation again amongst all of those key people and see what they say. I don't know who's all on that organics committee within SWANA, and I'd be curious to know, what their thoughts are or where it made most sense.
If I could just jump in real quick, Rob, I wonder if you're, for some reason I'm echoing right now. Rob, there you go. Rob, I wonder if you could jump in if you're still listening in on, just because you, if I heard you right the other day when I was up visiting, you are active with the national with the U.S. Composting Council. So I figure you must have some perspective on this. I wonder what you have to say. I can unmute you. I can try unmuting you. Does that work? Can you
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. At the national level, with the time that I've been on the USCC board of directors, there's definitely an encouragement to get all of the different chapters within states, that sort of thing, but there's not a huge emphasis putting, more and more resources into making sure we're trying to do this, but the efforts are into getting more members for the U.S. Composting Council, and indirectly that leads to more and more chapters. Kind of as an offshoot right now, we're going through the motions of making New Jersey as the next state subchapter in that way. I know at the national level, it would be very welcomed, especially from the Midwest, given the experiences with obviously Minnesota and Iowa, and there's a Michigan and Illinois chapter as well, so we'd be fitting into that realm very easily. To try to comment on some of the other things, I agree with everything that's been said about the involvement of SWANA and ARO and where this would sit at the same time. I think regardless of where it sits, it would only be a benefit to everybody in the state, bringing us all together, linking us up in some kind of a forum to talk. I know, let's say selfishly, being at a university from a teaching and research standpoint, it makes it much easier to reach out to different people and include different people on different things, but just getting everybody talking in the same place, I think, is a great idea overall.
And you've been active in that. I don't really know these acronyms, but I don't think you've been, you didn't mention ARO, but you've been active with this subcommittee of SWANA, is that right? The committee that Casey has been facilitating.
So no, I have not been part of that committee.
Oh, okay. Well, some of those folks were invited to join this call. I don't know if anyone, and Brian, you went to, and Melissa both went to one of those meetings this past month, if I remember hearing right. And I can unmute you if you need me to. It's not working.
Sorry.
There you go, Brian.
Honestly, a bit distracted. Kind of missed what you guys were talking about.
That's okay. We've been talking. I think some people know what all these acronyms are, and maybe some don't. But I went to a few meetings of. The DNR has been supporting one larger committee, a subcommittee of which I've attended. I think you were there at that committee in the past month. I think Melissa and James maybe were up at that too. So is that one of the committees we're speaking of? Is that the same committee you're talking about, Angie?
Is that the forum group?
Yeah, FORM, FORRM. That's different from ARO and the other group, Shawarma?
It is, yeah. So ARO is the Associated Recyclers of Wisconsin.
Okay.
SWANA is the Solid Waste Association of North America, and we have a Badger chapter here in Wisconsin. FORM is another group that was formed to just start talking, like not necessarily, it has ARO representatives on it. It probably has some, I don't actually know who's all on that group. It's a group of statewide folks just making some, I wish I knew a little bit more, honestly. I just know people who are sitting at that table. But if you're in that group, you kind of know a little bit more about what that focus is. But it's not housed within ARO or SWANA.
Okay.
It's more of a statewide group. So.
And Rob, you or Dave, you're involved with that group, no?
I believe Dave is.
Okay, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the DNR group. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah, so I am involved with that group. I mean, I think there's a nice mix of folks involved there, and I mean, the organics is definitely the focus. I mean, we're definitely, how shall I say, we're using the EPA's food hierarchy as our sort of driving factor, and then we've been meeting, I don't know, I want to say for the better part of 18 months now, on and off. And I think like the you know, the organics collection and sort of focusing on that has really taken shape in sort of two spots, I think. One is that there has been an agreed upon focus to bring more education to backyard composting overall, and to also be looking at how we create, and I think this goes back to sort of, Greg, where you've tried to focus the conversation, these sort of localized networks that will allow composting to become more predominant, particularly by taking and looking at how we can create a template or guide to facilitating basically compost and organics producers and connecting them with compost and organic users who are in need, and trying to make that collaboration more, making it easier and more uniform and sort of harmonious. But I don't, you know, that's a subcommittee and that works its way up to the DNR, and the person we'd want to talk to is either one of the co-chairs or the like founding chair, to really see where that's going. But I think it does speak to the need that sort of like Angie brought up with Arrow, and there's definitely overlap between the forum group I'm in and Arrow, you know, that there is a network of people overall who are interested in this. And so what's the best way to unify that force is, I think, the bigger question.
Okay. Well, at least that sorted out my confusion that it is indeed another group, another committee of a committee. And so there's a lot of, it's a good sign that there's interest. It's just a complication of there being several existing entities. And we're proposing, or we're at least floating out there the idea of forming another entity. So I just want to, I think we might be running out of our time and energy here, but I just wanted to float up on the screen here why I initiated this in the first place. And Melissa knows about this, but I think you can see my screen right now, and Steve's aware of this. In Milwaukee, we've had this SARE grant, Sustainable Ag Research and Education Grant, for the past almost 2 years. It will, the funding is finished September 30th. But the only thing that we really committed to do in the project was to come up with a plan together to scale up food waste composting in Milwaukee, and to redirect whatever we can of that to 10 zip codes in the form of soil amendments so that people who need it to can grow food. So top on the list, and this was a list that's kind of come up over an iterative process over the last year or so, was just that we need to form some kind of a coalition that will outlive the grant, because there is we have a lot of the players at the table. You can see the logos down below. Some of you have met James from Blue Ribbon Organics. Some of you may know Purple Cow. This is a young guy, or not young, but a guy trying to get started in composting. There's Melissa, of course, Compost Kids, a nonprofit. So all those first 5 are all people whose passion is in composting, and then the rest of it is kind of universities and some public sector folks. And we want to hold the group together in the Milwaukee area. There was thought that, well, maybe we could hold everyone together in the state level and Milwaukee. So I don't know where it's at now. I don't need to share this anymore, but I just wanted to explain why I initiated this, and I don't know how folks want to proceed. Do we want to try, Angie? Do we want to try to pull together another one of these video type meetings sometime in the future and bring the groups that to the table? Bring maybe, and we already did offer the forum folks. The forum folks were invited to this. So what do you think as next steps? Just ideas for next steps.
Well, I do know that there's, like we said, there's a lot of interest. There's all these groups that are talking amongst their own little groups. What I would personally like to see is that the list of names of everyone, or the organizations too, that are present within all of these little conversations that are happening. And I'm guessing we're going to see a lot of overlap, and then start talking as a group and decide if this is really important to have a U.S. Composting Council component, be a state chapter, be connected to the U.S. Composting Council. I see value to that. It is a question of is that necessary, or what are those benefits? I've been to U.S. Composting Council conferences, and I know that they provide a lot of good information and good connections on a national level. So I think the conversation has to continue, but I think that obviously all of these various committees need to come together and have one conversation, or at least representatives from all these committees to come together and just decide, like, why has everyone decided to do it individually and not join up with other conversations that are already happening?
So Angie, does Arrow still have an annual meeting?
The annual meeting is in conjunction, so it's a jointly hosted conference with Arrow, SWANA, and WIC-SWAMA. And it happens every February or in the early spring or late winter. And Arrow's annual meeting happens within that conference. Same with SWANA, same with WIC-SWAMA.
So is that a vehicle perhaps to bring all these parties together and talk about?
It sure is. Mm-hmm.
Because you could also, well, I think someone here has talked to Linda Norris-Wall from the U.S. Compost Council, or maybe I'm thinking of Iowa, because I'm talking to Iowa too. They're talking about this as well. But bringing in maybe someone from Michigan, because I know they're organized as a subgroup of their recycling, to talk about how they did that, how it works. If that's a route people want to go, you could bring in, I could come. Well, I can't come in February, but but someone from a state chapter that's independent, and how that works, so that people get an idea of how these function, and then they have a better means of making a decision, about what they want to do. Because it sounds like everybody's interested, but nobody really wants to make the decision because they're unsure.
Well, I'm not sure how often it's been floated, forming a chapter, at least lately. And, some of the folks, the forum folks, had an opportunity to join this, and Dave did. So we can try again. We could try to direct people to the event in February. That's a bit of a ways off. I don't know if we want to try it, make any other attempt between now and then. Maybe we could all just keep our ears open and look for opportunities. If I think, Ginny, you were our kind of keynote speaker of sorts this time to get us, pull us together. And, maybe there's someone else that we could, rather than, it be a question of, should we form a state chapter or whatever, maybe just something that is a speaker who has brought a broad enough interest, or a conversation is broad enough interest that would get everyone to the table in a setting like this, because travel always makes it more difficult.
Yeah, it does.
So
how about if I have several really good contacts in the Michigan chapter, and maybe I can connect you up with one of them, and you can talk to them about the model that they have, which is different from Minnesota, and try to, parse out how that might work and make it might work better. There's, like I said, there's several U.S. Compost Council chapters that are subsets of the recycling organization in their state. I just can't remember them all right now, except for Michigan. But you only need one. Yeah.
Well, so now, I think we're at the end here. There's several questions I kind of thought to ask and didn't get around to. And I don't want to broach them now, but it could be for future conversation. Like, what if you had a lobbyist? What would you lobby for? That was one thing. That got to that last question on the agenda. Where are you headed? And I think it's not so exciting to talk about how are we going to fund, someone to do grunt work or hard work. It's more fun to talk about a vision, where we're heading. And another question I had was, is it possible to have a statewide chapter that somehow really serves local efforts? Because again, composting is to a large degree a local thing. So, in Minnesota, you've kind of got the Twin Cities, that whole metro area, and then there's kind of everything else. You called it
Greater Minnesota.
Greater Minnesota. Here we're much more dispersed, you know, Stevens Point, Green Bay, you know, all over. Angie's down in the Southwest. So we would have the challenge of, you know, how have a statewide chapter that truly helps, you know, 10 different localities or more. And another question that we didn't broach is just, you know, Angie was bringing up the, you know, the overlap with recycling, but I think Dave, you know, was bringing up, you know, there's a lot of energy right now. So Steve Ventura and I, SJV, that's Steve Ventura. For some reason, he's not showing his face today, but he, you know, we're hearing a lot of buzz in our world, the food system world, around the top part of that pyramid, you know, redirecting food to people who need it. And there's a lot of passion there. And that even can get into not just getting fresh food to shelters or emergency food centers, but also how can you pool that food and process it and get it into a form that it can be stored. So it's really it's about eliminating waste in all these ways. And some people are really excited about you know, anaerobic digestion and so maybe maybe I guess what I'm trying to feel towards is there's some kind of a visionary speaker who we could bring to the table who has this, who can speak to a vision for, you know, 20 years from now, where do we want to be in Wisconsin? With how do we eliminate food waste, and what's the visionary path to getting there? And I think that might be a little more interesting than forming a 501c3 and you know, all the details. You know, well, I guess anyone else like to have the final words or good for the cause commentary? Melissa, you're one of our biggest advocates and passionate people. Why don't you close with some thoughts? Put you on the spot here.
Yeah, thanks. No pressure, right? Well, I just want to see us get it done. You know, I know we can. I just want us to talk to each other and get it done. And however that works, I'm in. So let's do it.
And I was hearing similar enthusiasm from Angie to make something happen here. And Brian, I'm really glad you joined the call. Having Madison at the table is important. It's our state capital. It's our you know, a lot of research power here at the university. So having you at the table is really positive. So thank you.
It's something we're absolutely committed to as a city. I mean, we have a comprehensive plan goal that at least in 10 years to have a citywide food scrap recycling program. And this is all part of that conversation. It's like, how do we do it? We know how important it is. Now we just kind of echoing Melissa a little bit. Let's get it done.
Yeah. And Rob, thanks to you too. I think it's pretty cool. You're on the board of the U.S. Composting Council. We probably should have prepared more questions for you. And I was glad to go up to Stevens Point, and there's a lot of activity up there. That's kind of a hub of environmentalism in this state. So I think it's worth trying one more time. I think we all should just go home, have a beer or whatever you like to drink, and get creative and see if we can come back with another idea. And I think we should try talking again in, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Not wait till February, Angie, but maybe you have a meeting in you know, September or October that maybe preps us for a February gathering.
Yeah, well, proposals for the state conference, the deadline is August 31st. And so if we have opportunities for, you know, panel discussions or even just continuing this conversation. And and I will talk with, you know, Karen Sig and Melissa Johnson. I'm sort of the behind the scenes of the two of them, who I think may both be on the forum conversation.
Yeah, Melissa. Yeah.
So neither of them could make it today, but I'm here equally as passionate and but sort of more behind the scenes of the two of them. So I think that there's room for all of it, and we can figure out a way to make that conversation happen. I think it should happen before conference, but maybe it's a nice lead up to conference as a place where everybody's already coming together. And if we can have a track session or sessions, you know, plural, on composting, I'd love to see that again. As a passionate composter, we try to make sure that voice is heard within conference. It doesn't always work, but this year we certainly can do that, but I think it should start sooner than later.
Okay. Well, let me know, or let any of us know if there's something that we can do, or if we need to turn something in to get to get a panel on it. Let's talk. I think it'd be really interesting, a panel that just kind of talked about Madison, Milwaukee, Stevens Point, and maybe the stuff you're doing in the South. It doesn't matter. There's probably 6 or 10 groups around the state that are doing something. It would just be great to.
I think there's a whole lot more, actually.
Yeah.
They're popping up, like Lacrosse is looking at it, and there's a whole lot of little small composters happening in communities that are unknown here in Wisconsin.
And I'm surprised no one said it, because I say it all the time, is one advantage to pooling our efforts a little more is we could identify some research questions or identify a strategy and get some funding that we can't get as smaller, less cohesive groups. And I think maybe the U.S. Composting Council brand would be helpful in that. I don't know, maybe we don't need it, but I'm in the world of pursuing grant funding, and I work with a bunch of amazing researchers, and there's a lot of giant research questions in this. I wish I had invited some of the folks. Do you all know Becky Larson? Anybody know that name?
Sure.
So I think she's got a lot of passion for this too, and she's working with some very heavy hitters, on modeling and data analysis, and I should have brought them up or encouraged them to join this call, but they have a very large research grant right now, and so it's just, I have always believed there's a $500,000 grant waiting to happen that lays out a strategy, lays out the research questions that are needed to answer and pools. And I don't mean to lean so hard on the cities, but I think it is important when you bring the population of Madison and Milwaukee to a project. It's just, that's a lot of waste. And we have a lot of problem in this state with resentment toward Madison, Milwaukee, and we need to learn to think more broadly to the rest of the state's needs. So it's tough. That's our challenge. I am, as I said in the beginning, the least knowledgeable of everyone on this topic. I just, I can try to pull folks together, but I think so can you. So I guess, we can talk forever. Ginny, thank you for joining us and have given us a reason to talk. And this is recorded. I'm not sure anybody would really want to sit through an hour and 20 minutes of this, but in case if you know anyone that missed the meeting and wants to know what happens, have them email me, and I can make it available.
And I will get you a couple of names from Michigan that use the model with the recycling organization there. Maybe that'll be helpful to you. Maybe it won't, but
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Your choice.
Thank you. All right. Well, unless anybody's got anything else, we'll just sign up and I'll hang up this call here.
All right.
Thanks, all. Enjoy your afternoon. Great
You
conversation.
Good luck, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for organizing.
There's Steve Ventura. There he is.
Thank you for organizing. Take care, all.
Sure. Bye-bye.